Welcome to a top-down, two-at-a-time sock tutorial from the MC Knitting Adventures podcast. We're going to make a pair of socks. We're going to do them two at a time. And so through pictures and through video, you're going to see the steps to be able to make those socks. So let's get started. The first thing we need to get organized is what kind of needles you're going to need and what kind of yarn and how you need to set it up. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you have a circular needle. So this is a 2.25 because that's what I do for socks, but you need the needles to be 40 inches. And the reason for that is as you do magic loop, you have to be able to fit 2 socks on those needles. So you need to do that. So that's the first thing. You also probably will like to have some bulb stitch markers. Those are going to help you to keep organized where you are. And then the other thing that you need to do is organize your yarn. So there's 2 ways to do it. One way is to have 2 50-gram skeins. So here's some example of wool-free sock by Premier Yarns, and these are 50 grams. So that's going to make my life easier because 50 grams for each sock. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is to get a 100-gram skein, or in this case, ball of yarn. But what you're going to need to do is divide it in half. So if you have a scale in your kitchen, then you can measure 50 grams in each ball, and that's going to get you set up so that you can knit, because you have to have the balls separate. Otherwise, your life is going to get very complicated very quickly. Now, when you cast on your stitches, this is where life gets interesting when you're doing a 2-at-a-time sock. So I'm going to guide you through the process. There's going to be a sock 1 and a sock 2, and that will help you organize. Now you need to make sure you understand how many stitches you're going to use for your sock. The socks that you'll see in our video are 56 stitch socks. So that means half of that's 28 stitches. If you're doing a 64 stitch sock, then 32 stitches is half. And if you're doing a 72 stitch sock, then 36 stitches. So I'm going to be throwing out my half of 56, and that will be 28 stitches. So what you have to do is start with your first ball of yarn, and what you want to do is you want to cast on your half. So in mine, it's 28 stitches. That's the first thing. Then you're going to take your second ball of yarn, and then you need to cast on all of the stitches for the second sock. So in my case, you're going to cast on 56 stitches. So all of the stitches you need to have on. Then life gets interesting because now we have to make our magic loop. So you want to slide those stitches for the second sock onto your cable. You want to pinch it halfway through those stitches and then pull them along. So now what you have on the front, you would have 28 stitches for the first sock, 28 stitches for the second sock, then there we'll see the cable, and then you'll have your other 28 stitches. So once again, if it's a 64 stitch sock, it would be 32, 32, cable, 32. All right, we're almost there. Now, when you go to do the last stitches that you need to do for the first sock, you're going to cast them on right now. So you cast on the last one, so my last 28 you'll see. And so what you'll see on the needles is on the front, you'll see 28, 28, and on the back, you'll see 28, 28. Now, it is a little tricky to cast on those stitches, the last stitches for that first sock. It's a little bit tricky, but I know you'll be able to handle it. Once you have cast on all your stitches, then what you're going to do is start working on your sock. So you'll pull out the back needle and start working on that front needle. And so you're going to do your rib for the first sock, half the first sock, your rib for half the second sock. Then you're going to rearrange things with your magic loop, and then you'll do the rib for the second part of the second sock, and then the second part of the first sock. I know it sounds confusing, but when you see the pictures, you'll see. And so you're going to do all your ribbing and keep going. It is that first setup that is tricky, but once you've got going, and you're doing the 2 at a time, you will see how nice it is. You don't have to count rows. You're just going to keep going. Now the socks that you see in the pictures are socks that have a pattern to it. My suggestion is that first time you do a 2 at a time sock, you just knit a vanilla sock, just plain knitting, so you don't have to worry about that. And you're just going to knit down the leg as far as you need to until it's time for the heel flap. When you get to the heel flap, there's no problem. You're just going to go back and forth, and you'll just do the heel flap of the first sock, the heel flap of the second sock, and then you'll turn the needles. And then you come back the second sock, back the first sock. When you get to the heel turn, life gets a little interesting. And the reason for that is when you do a heel turn, you only knit part of the way across, and then you have to go back on that heel of the sock. So in order to do that, when you're doing 2 at a time socks, what you need to do is do the entire heel turn of one sock. You may have to slip some stitches over to the needle, and then you're going to do the entire heel turn on the other sock. And when that's all done, then you need to mark the middle of the stitches that you have left. Now you've got the heel turns done, and now we have to do some picking up of stitches. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick up the stitches along one side of the first sock and then stop, and then come to the second sock and pick up the similar side and pick up those stitches. So now what you can see is you're ready to go across the top of the sock. So that comes next. So you knit across the top of the sock, of sock 2, then of sock 1, and now you're ready to pick up the stitches along the other side. When you pick up the stitches on the second side of the heel flap, you will start to see what's going to make life a little interesting. So you're going to pick up the stitches from that second side of the heel flap, mark the center of the heel of the sock, and then as you come down the other side, you're actually going to be knitting the first part of that sock. So it's pick up the stitches, and then you're going to come down the other way and knit those stitches. So you can see that as you come around that needle, you're going to be actually doing 2 different things. You're going to be finishing up one row and starting a second row. So you do that on both socks, and then once again, you're ready to go across the top of the sock. As I mentioned earlier, when you pick up the stitches to do the gusset, you must pick them up on the right side, then knit across, and then come back and pick them up on the left side, which is great, but we then need to understand that every time you do a row and go all the way over this way, that this is the start of a row and this is the end of the row. So you're always going to be finishing a row and starting a new row. And that changes what we have to do when we're doing our gusset decreases. So let's just take a look at that. All right, so here is my diagram. So hopefully that's helpful. There's the needles. And what I've done is done some coloring so that you can see. So there would be the last part of the round 1, and then I'm starting round 2. So when you're doing gusset decreases on a sock, one round there's decreases and one round that you're just knitting plain. And so you always have to remember that, let's say I had just finished a decrease round here, then I'm going to have to decrease here and come back and knit this. Okay, so that this is the last part of the first round and the first part of the second round. That makes life a little interesting. We don't have to worry about the top of the sock. It's the top of a sock, but we just have to make sure we organize. Now to help me out with this, I've created a chart, and it's just going to help me to remember what I'm doing. So when I do the one of the half circles, I am going to decrease until I get to the stitch marker, and then I'm going to knit. And then I would check that off. So I do that on both socks. Check it off. Then I knit straight across, and then when I come to do that hoop again. This time I'll be knitting and then decreasing. Okay, let's say I've done this round, and this part of the round was a decrease row. So this would have been a decrease. So on the row previously, I would have done a knit plain and a decrease, knit plain, and then a decrease. So we're talking about the gusset decreases. So because I've knit plain and decreased, when I come back over here, I'm going to have to do the decrease to match up. So that would be this row right here, which means I would decrease till I get to the stitch marker, and then I would just knit plain there. Once I got through that row, I would check this off my list, and then the next time around, I would knit and then decrease. Now, I'm just going to show you on the socks themselves. So when I count my stitches, if I count on the right side, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 of them. So there's 18 on there, and over here on the other part, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19. So there's 19 there. So that means I have decreased on this part, come across, and when I come through here, I'm going to do a decrease. So that's going to be one of those decrease and then knit plain. You can do it by counting stitches, but you really do want to keep tabs on what's going on. Lots of people can read their knitting, and so it's just going to help you out. I really think this chart would be very helpful to do. I have a little book beside me that I have this on, and then I just check it off and I keep working. For some people, you might want to write the number of stitches that you need to have until you get done your gusset decreases. Once your gusset decreases are all done, then you don't even have to worry about this, because you're just going to be knitting the bottom of the sock and knitting the top of the sock. I've been working on my decreases for my gusset decreases. So now I just want to show you how I'm using this chart. So this says decrease and then knit. That comma is basically this stitch marker. So when I do something like this, I need to decrease and then just knit that side. Now I've just kept track. So in this case, when I decreased and knit, both of them had 16 stitches. I'm using 56 stitches, so I need to have 28 along here. So then I knit and decrease, so you can see that that number's changed. When I decrease and knit, the numbers are the same again. The last row I did was knit and decrease, so I'm almost there. I have one more decrease to do, and what that means is I'm going to be up here. I'm going to decrease here because I've got 15 stitches there, and then I have 14 stitches along here, which is just the number I need. After I've done this decrease here, when I knit, I'm going to knit all the way across, but I'm going to remove the marker because there will be no more gusset decreases, and so that's going to help me just get myself set up so my top stitches are on one needle and the bottom stitches are on the other. Let's take a look at that. So I pull that through. Now to do this decrease, I'm going to knit the first stitch, and then this is a slip slip knit. So there's 1, 2, 3, 12, 13, 14. So there's the 14 that I need. I can now remove my stitch marker because I don't need it to hold the place anymore. And then I'm just going to knit across to finish the bottom of the sock. So now I have my 28 stitches along here. And once I get to the end, I'm going to show you what I do with my stitch marker. So now what's happened is I'm going to let the top be on the first needle. So it's actually now become the first of the round. So that's the end of the bottom. I'm going to take the stitch marker, which I removed, and all I'm going to do is put a marker right here, because that's now going to hold on to the first of the row, the beginning of the round. All right, so all I have to do is proceed, do the same thing on the other one. That will take this to 14, this will be 14. I'll take the stitch marker off, put it there, and then now I'm just gonna knit my socks and in the round using magic loop, and then once I get to the toe, we'll take a look at what happens then. I've completed the foot. I've completed the toe decreases, and I do them just as I was doing before. So you knit across the top of one sock, across the top of the other, and then you do both bottoms. So now that I'm there, I'm ready to do the toe and Kitchener the toes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the second sock and move it right out of the way. I don't need to worry about it. And so now I'm just going to finish it just like it's one sock. So I'm going to cut myself about 12 inches of yarn. And I'm going to thread my needle. Now, a number of people, when they're doing a Kitchener stitch, will do a setup. I've been watching some videos, and sometimes when you do the setup, you get a little bit of what they call a dog ear. So I'm not going to do that. So I'll just get you started on Kitchener stitch. So you slip the first stitch as if to knit. And then I just do turn it to the left and take it through the second stitch as if to purl. And then I snug that up. Give it a bit of a tug. And then on the back, you do the opposite. So you purl and take off, and you knit and leave on. And once again, same idea. Give it just a wee tug. And now I'm back to the front. So I take the first one as if to knit and take off, the second one as if to purl and leave on, and give it a tug. Now sometimes what I'll do after the first couple is just give it a little bit more tug and get things sorted out. And now on the back, it's first stitch is as if to purl and take off, second stitch is as knit and leave on. And then we'll get ourselves sorted out. And we'll just keep repeating that. So slip as if to knit and take off, slip as if to purl and leave on. And then on the back, it's the opposite. So the first one is slip as if to purl and take off, and then slip as if to knit and leave on. And so we're just going to go through the rest of the sock, the toe of the sock, and get to the end, and then we'll take a look. So I have 2 stitches left on each needle. I'm going to go through like I did before. So the first stitch is slipped as if to knit and take off, slip as if to purl and leave on. And you can see the toes doing nicely. And now I'm going to slip as if to purl and take off, slip as if to knit and leave on. Just have 1 stitch left, so I'm going to slip as if to knit and take off, slip as if to purl and take off. And then my job is just to finish these parts off. So I'm just going to take my needle, I'm going to go into this spot right there, and I'm just going to take the thread into the inside of the sock. So let me get my hand inside the sock. This is always a little bit of a jiggly here. There we go. So I want to make sure I catch that nicely. So I'm going to go down there and pull it right through and give it a bit of a tug. And then let's take a look at that toe. So there's the toe. I don't have dog ears on either side. The socks are finished. So now I just have to finish weaving in the ends, and then we'll take a look at the socks. So I hope this tutorial has helped you to figure out how to do your socks 2 at a time. I do like it. It makes the socks seem to go quicker, and it also, you don't have to count stitches. You don't have to count rows the same way. Usually I'm making little tick marks on a piece of paper, but in this case you just do the same thing for both socks. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you're seeing, give me a thumbs up, comment down below. If you have any questions, just put them in the drop-down box below, and I will do my best to help you out. So until next time, you take care.